Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Director's Playbook. I'm your host, Paul Lovelace, and today we're diving into the topic of technology in the funeral profession. Every successful funeral home should have technology as part of that game plan. It's a very broad topic with many implications. However, it's one that's not without controversy. And so today I am joined by Josh McQueen and Kyle Swearingen. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good to see you both. I mean, you guys are resident authorities on technology and innovation in the funeral space, and we're just happy to have you on today and talk a little bit about technology and what's happening around our profession. Sound like a good plan?
Absolutely.
So let me just jump right in here a little bit and get started. What's a hot topic today when it comes to technology here in the funeral space?
Well, I think the obvious answer is AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd get into that. I didn't know we were going to
Absolutely.
get into it right off the bat.
I think it's the hottest topic.
It really is. I think we're just trying to figure it out.
There's just so many things happening with it today that it's just right now it's been hard to kind of wrap your head around what it can and can't do and where it's headed, and there's just so many different evolving factors on a daily basis that have just keep things evolving every single day. It's crazy.
What I think's funny is I didn't even know what Chat GPT was, just a few years ago. And here we are talking about it almost every day. And which reminds me, I just think about some of the technology that was prevalent whenever I started back in the day in the 90s. I mean, you guys, I'm much older than you. I know it's hard to believe, maybe 25 years or more possibly. But be that as it may, so you guys have heard of pagers. You probably looked them up. We had pagers back in the day. We had to call in to check our voicemail from a payphone. It was tough times, guys.
I remember when I joined the company, joined the profession, I obviously knew what a fax machine was, but I remember like a month into the job being asked to send a fax and me giving this blank stare of like, I have no idea. I've never done that before in my life. That was 15 years ago. So yeah, it's like, I have no idea what to do here.
It's funny. It's funny because you mentioned fax, and I bet, I don't know what your guess would be, but what percentage of funeral homes in the United States still have a fax machine today, you think?
Oh, I think it's higher than we would probably think. That
I think
would.
it's 80%.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Now, how many actually use that on a regular basis? I think that's a different, a lower percentage, but I think most have still held on to their fax machine just in case.
That's what we ought to do for our listeners here. Just let us know, email us, the Director's Playbook at funeraldirectorslife.com. Let us know if you still use a fax machine. We'd love to hear. Or a typewriter even.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the typewriter is the other one that a lot of funeral homes have held on to. Then they're triplicates and everything. And it's like, how often do you actually use that?
It'd be interesting to know. And we'd love to hear from you, our listeners, on that. But it's one of those things, I truly believe funeral homes are trying to evolve into that new paradigm of the digital age. I just think that sometimes we're reluctant to let it go, right? And before we kind of get into some of that, what would you think about some of the processes today that are being used that'll be obsolete here in the very near future? I know we mentioned typewriters and fax machines, but what else comes to mind?
Well, I'll let Kyle answer the question on the specific technology, but I do think it's worth taking a step back and talking about really almost like a neuroscience side of this, that why do we hold on to these things? And I think everyone you talk to in the profession would say that our profession is slow to adopt technology. And why is that? And I think there's a couple of reasons. The first is that we're really sensitive to the needs of the family, and we're worried about new technology making us as the funeral director look foolish or screwing up something that really you have to get right the first time. And that's completely understandable. The other side of it is there's this concept known as neuroplasticity. And basically the idea is that as our brains are forming, there's literally these neural pathways that are being developed. And as we get older, it's harder to change those pathways. And so that,
Josh, I would love to know what you just said, but I can't even Google it because I'm not sure I can spell it.
yeah,
Say it one more time.
neuroplasticity.
Okay.
So, but it's almost like, you think of like a record has a grooves in it that our brains are getting formed. But this whole saying of, you can't teach a dog new tricks, it's not entirely true, but there is truth that as we get older, it's harder to learn new things. And so as we talk about AI and all these other things, I'm sure there's a lot of funeral directors out there that are in their 50s or 60s and like, I just don't want to learn another thing. And it's because it does actually, from a neurological standpoint, from our brain standpoint, it is harder to do than when we're 20 years old.
That makes a lot of sense.
So a great example of that is, your favorite music. If you ask anyone what their favorite band is, their favorite music, they almost always say something that's from when they were 18 to 24 years old.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. And so
Journey,
we all of us, our favorite music is essentially late high school, college. And so, but that's because those neural pathways are being formed, and that's when we learned that this is what we like. And then all new stuff after that sounds like garbage. So same thing happens when we're trying to learn new skills or anything like that.
Yeah, Kyle, what's your opinion on that, on your neural pathways and such?
I don't know much about neural pathways, but the way I kind of think about it is AI has been something that's really hot and heavy, right? And a big concern that I've kind of heard is they're afraid AI is going to try to replace, people interactions. Well, I don't think we're ever really concerned about AI replacing human interactions in the funeral space. I think that's a cornerstone to how the funeral industry works. We have to have human touch. We have to have human interaction. But where I think we have the potential to get better is in how we use AI. And right now, AI is crazy. I mean, it is, even myself, I've kind of been caught in this fog of what do I focus on? What do I not focus on? What technology should I use? Do I use this or that? And it can be overwhelming to figure out what that looks like and what direction you should take it or how you should adopt it. But I think what's important is you kind of start small, and I'm not ever concerned about it replacing any people. The way I kind of see it is, if you don't adopt and use AI to some degree, you kind of start to get left behind. I see it as a tool, not as a replacement kind of thing. So I think in the funeral space, funeral directors and funeral home owners and the staff at funeral homes could use AI to kind of help enhance those in-person interactions, get them information quicker, find ways to kind of enhance the arrangement conference and provide quicker, faster customization to these arrangements.
I can certainly see that. I could also see AI before you get to the customer-facing technology. It might be some more of the in-office facing technology. In other words, how can we use AI or innovation to get rid of the paper in the funeral home, or get rid of the typewriter, or get rid of the filing cabinet, or these analog experiences and processes? Can one of you speak to that paradigm and what's happening in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of specific things that are, a lot of things you could discuss there. I know one of the things that we're introducing within FDL's sister company, Passari, is our AI vital scanner. And so one of the things we're doing there is with the with our mobile app, being able to scan a paper intake form, whether it's a first call sheet, a vital sheet, whatever you call it, but being able to scan that, have AI read the handwriting and then enter in all the details into the case. And so taking what could be 15, 20 minutes of data entry down to, 20 to 30 seconds of uploading. And so that would be a very specific way of just streamlining processes to make the funeral director, or often the administrative assistant who gets the case file dropped on their desk, making that person more efficient so that they can focus on other tasks that are more prevalent and meaningful to the family.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there's probably listeners on around. So there's no way that this thing can read my handwriting, my funeral director handwriting, and so forth. So, Kyle, can you speak to that? How accurate is this AI recognition?
You'd be shocked how good it is. I mean, I've spent the better half of the last year and a half playing with this type of software, and it can, if it can read my crappy handwriting, I think it can read a lot of different things. I mean, we've even implemented something like that internally to help read the paper handwritten contracts that we get internally. So I've spent a good year just looking at a lot of bad handwriting.
Well, doesn't the technology improve it? So it may start at like 85%, just to throw a number out there, but over time it improves to 90, 95% as it recognizes and learns.
Absolutely, and it's something that we can start to kind of train it on different patterns that we're seeing in handwriting, or if we get a lot of business from one person that writes really terribly, we can kind of train it. What's really cool with it is we can actually build our own AI models around it. So what we've done on the paper contract side of things is we've taken samples of like 100 different contracts, and we've compared what it extracted against what was actually there, and then it creates these LLM models that are much easier to train and allows it to learn and get better, and we get much higher degrees of accuracy once we can train models on real results.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. You said LLM model?
Yeah, sorry, that's a large language model.
Okay.
So when you're thinking Chat GPT, you've seen the GPT 3.5 or 4.0 or 4.0 mini or O3. Those are what you call large language models, and it's what
Gotcha.
teaches the AI how to interact with you.
So every company has their own proprietary LLM, large language models. So OpenAI, which is the company that produces ChatGPT, they have their own. Versus then you see Google has their own. Another company called Anthropic, which has their tool called Claude. They have their own model. So all of these have their own models, and what you find is that some models are better than others for certain things, that they all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses, and they're all in a race right now trying to figure out who can be the one to rule them all.
Yeah, and don't they all have access to their own individual data set? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, they're all training it on different things,
Yeah.
and so we're in the Wild West right now of all
Yeah.
of this, and everyone's figuring that out.
Well, and I think that's what's a little bit scary about it. I think so. If you're a funeral home owner, funeral director, funeral professional, you may say, I'm not ready for artificial intelligence in my business because I don't want to be on the bleeding edge, right, of that. I'm okay with being on the leading edge, but I don't want to be on the bleeding edge. But is it possible that the families are actually helping introduce AI into the business without the funeral homes even being aware of it?
I think absolutely it is. That obituaries is a really obvious one,
Hmm.
where information's being provided and families will put all that into whatever tool it is, like ChatGPT, and say, help me write an obituary. And so they could be doing that and then bring it to the funeral home, and the funeral home would have no idea. Which is, by the way, why we introduced an obituary writing tool directly within our software, just to try to make that whole process easier. So, but yeah, I think there's lots of stuff like that.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, I mean, these innovations come to fruition because they're solving a problem of some sort, right?
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, that's every tool, right? But this is the newest one, and I think the biggest difference is that we've never seen something like ChatGPT where it's gained millions of users in an hour. That it's growing so fast and so rapidly. Facebook, it took it months to get to that place. And so we're just seeing this mass adoption more quickly than we've ever seen it before. And for funeral directors, I think we'd be foolish to think that families aren't bringing those things into the arrangement conference.
Exactly. Well, I know that, when it comes to marketing, for sure, you know, families are looking up, they go online. That's just what we do as a habit. You put in a Google search or something on Facebook potentially.
Yeah.
So, what type of technology is incorporated in some of the marketing aspects?
Yeah, again, Wild West. And so something we're looking at and studying is, you've heard of SEO, search engine optimization. Everyone's trying to figure out what does that look like for AI. And so rather than typing into Google funeral homes in my local town, we're in Abilene, so funeral homes in Abilene, Texas. If you type the same thing into ChatGPT, what shows up? How does that, how do I help make sure that my funeral home shows up first? And honestly, right now, again, it's the Wild West. And no one's quite sure how to do that. There's a lot of studies that are going on right now and saying how do these different LLMs, how are they trained? What are they looking at? And so there's a lot of talks about backlinking and how do I make sure that my stuff is showing up in the local newspaper, and so that my funeral home gets asked because it's referencing, Abilene Reporter News and looking at that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that are looking at from that perspective. And I think that's going to be a big one that, as we talk about AI, what does it look like for shifting from Google search over to ChatGPT search? Google's scared right now, and they should be.
They're concerned. I mean, they have a monopoly basically in the search area, but I'm sure these other AI organizations are trying to encroach on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's been some things that I've been researching in terms of different technologies that we currently use to kind of see if there's different routes that we should take internally on how we implement different intelligent automation type stuff. And what's been really interesting is as I'm asking ChatGPT to do research for me, it's actually pulling back case studies that I've participated in and referencing me as a reference to myself of someone who's using a platform. And that's something that I typically wouldn't have seen if I was doing just typical research through Google.
So make sure I understand. Your work has made it into the data set of ChatGPT, so it's referencing yourself when you ask a search question?
Yes, if I'm doing research on a particular technology and I'm trying to find all the different vendors that may do this well. So a good example is looking at RPA type technology. If I'm doing RPA is robotic processing automation. So if I'm trying to look at who's doing RPA processing well, I basically give ChatGPT a prompt of, hey, give me the top 5 vendors that do this really well so that I can start researching who makes sense to kind of partner with. Since we already use somebody, what's really interesting is when it's giving me recommendations of people who are using these different platforms, it actually recommends the platform we're using and then uses us as a case study because there's a published article out on the interwebs of us using that platform. So it's been really interesting to see it reference things that we've participated in back to me as a reference point.
Yeah, that is fascinating. That's pretty cool. All right, well, good deal. Well, let's transition just a little bit, and we'll talk about some of the risks, I guess, that maybe funeral homes might face if they don't keep up with the technology trends. I mean, that's a good place to start here. What do you think, guys?
Honestly, I think them not accepting some of these technology trends, they will start to ultimately fall behind. To me, it's really around efficiency. How can you use technology to make your teams and your staff more efficient? How can you make yourself more efficient so that you can serve families in a better way? One of the big things I talk about when we bring funeral directors into our building is my goal with our technology is to give them time back with the families that they serve. Let them build better relationships with the people that they are serving on a daily basis, and less in the data entry and the admin side of things, because there's nothing worse than meeting with a family and having to be heads down in data entry while you're doing it. You want to be engaged with that family. You want to be able to engage in the conversation and be present in what they're kind of dealing with at the time. And I think you can use technology to kind of help enhance some of those interactions. Use something to record and transcribe the arrangement conference and summarize it back to you later so that you can go do the data entry at a different point. There's just a lot of different ways that you can use technology to enhance the relationships with the people that they're working with, make themselves more efficient, and ultimately serve the families in a better way.
And it's almost like it becomes a competitive advantage at some point because you're using that technology as a tool to enhance and improve the human touch, or the element that they really care about most, which is engaging with them and solving their problems and helping them.
Yeah, I think consumers, families' preferences and how they prefer to interact and what technology is used is always constantly evolving. It's slowly evolving, but it's constantly evolving. And, as we talk about AI, I would completely agree with you that right now there's an opportunity that, maybe to have that competitive advantage. I would say that right now you're not running the risk of necessarily getting behind. But if you wait 2, 3, 4 years, you will. I think another great example of that is texting aftercare. 5 to 7 years ago, that was a really novel idea. And you could say I'm on the bleeding edge, but that, for those that use it, it is a competitive advantage. Versus now, if you're not doing something like that, you're behind. And so I think a lot of this is asking yourself and saying the question, am I okay to make myself uncomfortable, to get out of that comfort zone and my team, and yes, it's going to be a little bit more work. It's going to be a little bit challenging. But how can I disrupt myself to some degree? And I know in our profession disruption's almost become a dirty word. It's like, we've been hearing for 20 years that nothing's going to, that this company or whatever is going to be the next Uber and it's going to disrupt us. Completely understand all that sentiment. But there is a level of, can we disrupt our process? I'm not saying the funeral home is going to be disrupted, but can we disrupt our process? Can we disrupt the way that works for us? We're comfortable with it. We like it, in order to introduce something new that we think is ultimately going to help us serve families better.
So I want to talk about the internet. Of course, we're here in 2025, and the internet is basically everywhere now, or most everywhere, I should say. There's probably still some far remote areas that it doesn't get there. But we got Starlink and other things that are solving that problem. So what do you guys think about the Internet of Things? How important is that? How relevant is it to the funeral profession? What are your thoughts?
So one of the things the way I like to kind of explain this, because I'm sure many listeners probably have no idea what Internet of Things even is. So the way I like to explain it in a really simple way is it's the way your devices kind of communicate with one another. So imagine you've got milk in the refrigerator, and your refrigerator has the ability to talk to different devices. So when your refrigerator recognizes you are out of milk, it automatically puts milk on your grocery list, or automatically orders milk for you at a grocery store, or adds it to your pickup order. That is a really simple way of thinking of Internet of Things, is interconnected systems just talking to each other instead of a person kind of being in the middle of it. So when I kind of think of Internet of Things in the funeral industry, the first thing that kind of comes to mind is like a decedent tracking type of system, similar to how FDL's sister company Passari does decedent tracking, where you kind of take a picture of a QR code and we can kind of track as that body moves throughout the funeral home, what cooler they're in, where their personal effects are at. And that is different systems talking to one another as things kind of move around.
That's incredible stuff right there. I know in practical applications, funeral homes are using that technology to some degree in their businesses, and they're trying to figure out how it makes the most sense to use, I guess. But what I thought about was the Internet of Things incorporated with artificial intelligence. What would that look like? Maybe not today, but in 5 years or 10 years or in the future at some point.
I don't know that we know exactly what this will look like, but one of the things that comes to mind is that with larger funeral homes, a lot of them are beginning to use devices to track their vehicles. And so that would be considered Internet of Things. I can go online, I can see where a vehicle is at any given time. But what would be interesting is, okay, we add AI to that, and maybe it can say, hey, here's an optimized path. Or, hey, this specific driver is consistently driving at a faster rate and using more gasoline. Or so you can get a lot more detail from those devices, from the technology that you're already using to help you make better decisions. So that, that could be a random idea that's out there.
So one of the big things that's been really interesting is our kids right now are growing up in an age where their entire lives are recorded and documented on social media, online, and we're going to get into an age where you get to kind of end of life type stuff, and our kids are going to be able to have a full document of their grandparents' lives or their parents' lives, and be able to say, hey, what did mom and dad enjoy doing in the summer? And you're going to be able to get a full summary of pictures and videos and social media posts of what they enjoyed doing during the summer. Or I really enjoyed going fishing with my dad. Can you show me everything that we did together when we went fishing? And be able to really see a reenactment of that entire life that has been documented online since the beginning of time, right? So, and I think AI is going to be able to pull a lot of that stuff out and be able to use it and integrate it with the funeral industry in some form or fashion, because with all of this stuff being available online and all these systems interconnecting and talking to one another, it's going to be really interesting to see how some of that evolves. I don't think we're close to that today, but I think 5-10 years from now, those are going to be real things that we're going to be able to pull out and be able to provide families in kind of a memorialization, instead of having to depend on scrapbooks and pictures that were taken 50 years ago. We're going to be able to actually pull from a vault of their entire life that has been available and publicized online through social media and other various types of technology and things like that. So
Yeah, it's going to be amazing to be a part of that, because you're right. The digital world is taking over for everybody born, since 1995 probably. So that's kind of exciting. Oh, well, good deal. Well, let's, if a funeral home owner today or a funeral director who's listening wants to future-proof their business with regard to technology, what's one small step they could probably take just right away to get started being more innovative?
There's a lot of little things that you could do. I think it's more the mindset that's important. I think it's evaluating your business and saying, recognizing and being honest with yourself about where your business can improve. I think if you're willing to be honest and say, hey, I think we can be more efficient here. I think we can do better at creating ideas for families. There's so many tools and things that are coming out that would help and allow for those type of things. And so having a mindset of constant improvement, of constant growth, not allowing yourself to get comfortable, and for lack of a better term, fat and happy, and saying that we can always be serving families better. What's the best way to do that? And chances are there is going to be some sort of technology, some sort of innovative thing that you can look at to help yourself do that. And just because, I mentioned texting aftercare as an example. That's that technology came out 5 to 7 years ago. Great. But it's new to your business. It's innovative for your business. And so just because it's older technology doesn't mean that it can't still be quote unquote innovative. And so being willing to take that next step.
That's good advice, Josh. And basically disrupting yourselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kyle?
that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to agree with Josh completely on that. I mean, constantly looking internally at your processes and reevaluating and disrupting yourselves, and constantly looking and almost performing retrospectives on your business and your processes and how you interact with families, and constantly tweaking and finding better ways to enhance those experiences, and finding small ways to use technology to make those experiences better and enhance them. I think you don't have to always use technology to enhance those processes, but always finding ways to internally disrupt yourselves and constantly improve and constantly find ways to get better.
Well, and Kyle glossed over, he mentioned a term that we use internally of retrospective. But one of the things we try to do internally is in our processes at the very end, build in a time of reflection.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really easy in our businesses to skip over is, after you serve a family, what if you built a time, there's no technology involved in this, to sit down and ask what went well, what maybe didn't go well, what could we improve upon? And those are going to draw out a lot of the insights that you need in order to take an action that may be, innovation and saying, okay, we need to get better in this area. So, but that's a really simple next step.
It's also a really good time to reflect on what went well, so you can keep doing and repeating the things that you are doing well and that are working. So it's more than just fixing what's broken, but it's celebrating the success you're having as well.
Agreed. We believe in progress over perfection to a large degree, and I think that's just a part of it. Like you mentioned, Josh is having a good mindset for that. Well, good deal. Well, gentlemen, that's a wrap. It's been a pleasure to host you here today on the Director's Playbook. A huge thank you to Josh and Kyle for sharing their insights just on how technology can empower funeral professionals and serve families better. So take a moment to think, what's one small step you can do to enhance your business this month? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Reach out to us on the Director's Playbook at funeraldirectorslife.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.